I call it reparations.
It
All
is.
right. So before we get started, like, since I'm gonna give you your flowers, like, when I'm on Facebook and every time I see your post, it's not even recently around your book. It's been over the years. Like, your energy, the amount of confidence you exude through your photos, I receive it. I'm like, shit, she need a bottle, whatever it is she got, capsule it and send it to me so I could take them on my worst days. Okay. And I'm not even just gassing you up. Like, I know a couple of years ago you did a photo shoot and you just looked like Mother Goddess. And that actually inspired me to get into doing photo shoots for myself. So I had to say that because lately, like, people have been showing me a lot of love on social media, and it's helped me. Like, dang, I didn't even know y'all like viewed me that way. So you
Yeah.
really don't know like the type of impact you're making on people and who's watching you from afar. But I want to be more intentional with Black women. Like, no, let me tell you directly to you. Like, I see you, and I love everything that you stand for. I know we don't have that close of an intimate relationship, but like I said, your energy and just your smile alone. So I want to know, like, where does that confidence come from? Like, who instilled that
Ooh.
in you? Who nurtured that? Just lay it on me.
Well, first, I just got to say thank you and that I received all of that. And I don't know if you can tell, but I do have goosebumps.
Oh,
And um, it's so funny. I want to first address this and then answer your question.
mm-hmm.
It's funny because I think that my perception of self is something that I'm trying to understand because I only know what was going on in this body. Um,
Yes.
but the way that I am received, particularly by Black women,
Mm-hmm.
has been hugging me in ways that I didn't even know my spirit needed to
Oh.
be seen, held, and affirmed. And
Mm-hmm.
particularly, I taught high school, so my students are like 19 and up.
Mm-hmm.
And to see how they receive me, and to hear them say like how like I had one student who was like, I learned so much from you while I was in the classroom, and I'm still learning so much from you by witnessing you now.
Mm-hmm.
And she made me cry. um because I think that something that I have learned is that I don't even know how to say it other than like something in my head I often say is that I am for Black women. But
Mm-hmm.
I also know that you talked about how I got this confidence. Well, it was through a lot of motherfucking strife, right?
Okay.
It was through a lot of struggle. It was through um something that me and my therapist have talked a lot about is like, one of my trauma responses to destruction has been creation, has been art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think when I think about my confidence in this beautiful, juicy Black body of mine,
Damn.
I think
All
about
the
how like I
power.
was a fighter growing up. Like I was always, I was fighting because I was bullied heavily. And I think um that, my mother, you said who nurtured it. My mother always made it clear to me that I was loved in this body, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what my first poem, Beloved, is about. It's like all of these things were happening, but my mama still made sure that I was loved. I remember there was this one time in school, I was getting bullied really bad. And I came home and I was like, Mama, I'm ugly. And we did not have a lot of money. When I say my mom called off work, took me out of school the next day, we like pampered ourselves, you know what I mean? And not to say that I needed these external things, but she just wanted me to know what it means to witness my own self and nurture that self. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you go get your hair done and I want you to witness how you can transform. Yeah, I'm gonna take you to get some clothes. So I want you to witness how you can dress yourself in a way that exudes and further helps you stand in who you are. And so I'm really grateful for her in those moments where I was feeling, when I was allowing my opinion to be informed by outside
Mm-hmm.
um, situations in society that didn't serve me, that my mama snuck in there and was like, you know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna make it clear who you are, what you come from, and what you can do in this body that you've been given.
Mm-hmm. Man, I'm just like, oh my goodness, just listening to you. I'm like, when I see my own reflection in your
Mm.
story, so I'm like, ooh, I feel it coming already. I'm a Cancer, and I'm
Um,
trying to embrace my water sign as like I'm just a waterworks, and I'm learning there is a superpower in my vulnerability, but I receive that so much because just when you mentioned like the impact like Black women specifically had on you, just in nurturing you and covering you. My new mantra now is like nothing hits like a Black woman. Like that's
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that's why I created this space because I'm like, who better to understand, like you said, our strife, our struggles, our trauma, the shit that we go through better than a Black woman, and who has a better touch than the hand of a Black woman.
yeah,
I have yet to find it anywhere else. That's why people, always gravitate towards us. They love us. They're obsessed with us, even when they don't want to admit it. I feel like that's why there's such a war on Black women because there's an underlying obsession around us.
yes.
And so I love that you had that specifically with your mom. Me and my mom, we had some very critical conversations last year in therapy because I remember there was a moment when I was 8 years old, and I just remember staring in the mirror and I was looking at my nose and my lips and my cheeks
Mm.
and just how round my face was. And I started to cry because I'm like, I'm ugly. And
Yeah.
my mom, she came in and she was like, "What you crying for?" And I told her, but
Mm.
her response wasn't like, "Yo, mama." It was like she was it's funny, she was watching Maury, and this was when Maury was more than just like you are the father. There was actually serious segment. And it happened to be like these children who had like these terminal diseases that were on there that day. And she was like, "You over here crying over something like this where his kids over here dying." And so
Yeah.
she shamed me in that moment. And clearly it cut deep because I carried it for like 2 decades.
Mhm.
And I brought it up in therapy last year. And I told her, yeah, that really hurt. Like,
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like in that moment, you talked about how art has helped you, channel, those negative thoughts and go from like being destructive towards yourself and turn it into something that's constructive.
Yeah.
I wrote a letter and I told her, like, in that moment, I just needed you to say that I was beautiful and, know that I was like beautiful in my own uniqueness, right? Like now I wear this nose like an emblem because this is a dominant ass feature. Every
Period.
Reagan got
Period.
this nose, but I didn't have that. And so when we had that conversation, she was like, "Oh, I mean, I wasn't trying to like scoff you or anything. It's just it startled me that you were feeling that type of way about your beauty, and I just felt like I had to like intercept, like, no, you shouldn't feel this way. Black is pride and all that." I'm like, well, you should have said that, not not what you threw at me.
It's the softness. I think something that you're saying right now is important because as much as my mom had a loving response with that, she didn't been foul on some other stuff. And I think what I find ironic is um when people are talking about raising the dichotomous gender of girl and boy, they always suggest that girls get more softness. And to me, that's a real racialized reality. Because
Okay.
black girls, because black girls,
Come on.
we are
Oh, wait,
not
wait, wait. I need to say it one more time for the people that's tiptoeing before the benediction.
that.
Yeah, say it one
They
more
like
time.
they like to deny black girls of gentleness. We don't get to, be fragile. It's
Yeah.
like shit. We come out the room expected to be rough riders. Expected to bear, expected to just take, expected to just hurt, expected to carry and carry
Yeah.
and carry and carry. Can you carry more? Like that's what it feels like to be a black girl. And so to hear
Ooh.
your story and to hear, you saying like you needed some softness. You
Yes.
needed some gentleness in that moment. You needed someone to see you as like, a flower waiting to bloom instead
Mhm.
of like, and I think the thing too is like our mothers are often just doing what was
They-
their reality.
Yes. Yeah. Like all of that. Oh, this is gonna be a good ass conversation. No, like all of that, because I think for me on my own healing journey, like
Mm.
perspective is major key. Like learning the context of, okay, my mom was born in 61, right? Like she didn't
I was too. So you got an old school mama like me.
you
That's a different
know,
kind.
from the South, right?
Okay.
And she didn't go to an integrated school till she was like 9 or 10 years old. Like her parents were born in Jim Crow South, South Carolina, Georgia. So
Hmm.
the more I started looking at things, like I said, changing my perspective and looking at the context, the cultural context, the sociological context of things, I'm like, all right, it doesn't excuse it now. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
knowing like this attitude, like we ain't got time for tears. We ain't got time for that. Like toughen that shit up. You got to keep moving, pressing forward. Like these aren't real issues. But no, like self-identity and how I feel about myself, that really is an important issue. Like now I'm at a point, I'm like, love should be treated like the food we consume, the air we breathe, the shelter that we live in. Like love is that essential, especially love for yourself. You know what I mean?
Hmm. And I think I want to, lift up a point that you said about, it doesn't excuse it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that what I have found for myself, the point of acknowledging it also makes me think about how am to perpetuating that and nip that shit in the bud. And like something I had to think about is I spend a lot of time, with ancestral reverence. And
Mm-hmm.
partially because, not partially, but I think I was definitely led in this direction because my father died when I was young, when I was 9. My
Okay.
grandmother, who I'm named after, died when my mother was 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I was born into the world with some present ancestors. But what I realized is like, I love my daddy. Love him. There's a lot of shit I like about him. There was also a moment when I realized that I had some of his worst qualities. Okay? And
Ooh.
like,
I'm gonna need you to stop reading me for filth right now.
okay, I had to digest that shit and be like, ooh, same with my mom. My mom, I'm like, I get my anxiety. I'm like, oh, my mom has anxiety.
Mm-hmm. That
Right.
has
So I'm like,
gone unchecked, right?
yes. And I'm like, oh, so I'm seeing you and me. And I think something that has really inspired me right now is just like, I think too, seeing my mom turn 60.
Mm-hmm.
um and they're at a different turning point. It's like when you're at a 28, you're like on the verge of becoming like a full adult, and when you're in the 60, you're like moving to elder status. So it's like
Yeah.
we're both mirroring each other at these points of transition,
Mm-hmm.
and in us mirroring each other, we're having to like kind of like combat some of that shit that came up when
Mm-hmm.
she was an adult and I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as she becomes an elder and I become an adult, just to make our relationship stronger, but also so that more of that residue just gets left behind, in the past, and we can move into different states of our life without it so much. But yeah, fam, all of that.
Oh, I receive it all. I feel like, damn, I wish we had 2 hours for this conversation because it's feeding me so much. So, I mean, you talked about like, your childhood trauma and now like being able to like identify your parents' characteristics in you. Girl, that was a major thing for me as well. But learning to not even just acknowledge it, but accept it, right? And now I'm learning how to like repurpose the pain that I inherited, right? Because now I know like a lot of the behavior they perpetuated and that I took on, it is a trauma response. And they're just not aware of it. But now I'm doing a lot of healing, not just for myself. Like I saw a meme that says, you know, when you heal yourself, you're healing your ancestors as well. And I felt that 1000%.
And your descendants,
Yes,
right?
yes, right? Like forward, like wait,
And
forward and backward.
yes.
So, but who influenced you? Like, not clearly a trauma influenced you to want to do healing work, but was there somebody specific or somebody's that like you were able to identify this is the type of work that I want to do? Or was it just divine intervention where you came into it on your own?
I'm gonna be real with you. So when I was thinking about that question, my first response was myself. And the reason I said that is because a lot of my healing work has literally been life or death, right?
Hmm.
Like, given the reality of my trauma and the reality of my mental health, there have been several points in my life where I was like extremely suicidal or extremely, battling manic depression.
Hmm.
And healing was literally like, baby, like, you either gonna sink or swim right now. You either gonna figure out how to float in this water, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Or you're going under. And so the work was for me to get good. And it continues to be for me to use these tools to get good. Now, I think on top of that, I grew up really heavily in the church, right? The black church, right? My mother is from Yazoo, Mississippi. Um,
Oh yeah, you was
right,
deep in it.
right. And but I grew up in Chicago, but nonetheless in the black church. And when I was young, I would always, you know how the old folks be speaking over your life, right? Things
Mhm.
that were commonly said to me is like, oh, you're a prophet or you're a prayer warrior. Now, mind you, I'm like 11 and like whatever,
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, I was really running from God and religion for a long, long time
Mhm.
because spirit was present to me. Before my dad died, I had a dream of him dying at 9. So like the feeling of the spirit, I
Yeah.
was always aware of. Now, what I was supposed to do with that, how I was supposed to navigate it, was definitely something. But I honestly think, I still have to uplift and say my mom. Like I always say, I'm the consequence of her faith. Like I have altars in around my space. My mom converted one of her closets into a prayer room.
Mhm.
And, um, I'm starting this prayer line with some women that I'm connected with. She's been doing one for years. It was a Bible study teacher. So definitely, seeing my mom be a true woman of faith. And the reason I realized that distinction is when I came out as queer and pushed her on
Mhm.
her religion and like how she identified it. And when she still saw, my mom saw the first person I ever really brought home seriously. And she said, I see the light of God in her, right? And for my mom, right, this devout Christian, like under a doctrine that doesn't necessarily make room for queerness, to see God in her is when I also understood that, like, my mom is a woman of God, right? She's not a woman of the Baptist church exclusively or a woman of like Christianity exclusively. She is a woman of God. And seeing her walk in that light has helped me because for me, healing is about, I always say, when I'm close to myself, I'm close to God. And I know I'm not trying to make this super religious or spiritual.
Girl,
This
you better listen.
my
You
true
know,
thing.
like they do not have to tune in. You better give me a word up in here. Do not, we would not apologize. Continue, because I'm over here like, woo.
Because I think in some spaces, when folks want me to talk about healing, they want me to talk about the pretty stuff and the pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I can't talk about the reality is that spirit ran through all of this, like, it is in some of my lowest and most painful nights that I have heard the spirit of God echoing in
Yeah.
my body and in my ears. And also in that joy, like the morning that my book went alive for pre-sale and I really felt it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like the spirit, the Holy Ghost that I felt in and around my body just, made me, want to dance and move and so I think healing and spirit to me is just also transformed into like me connecting with my body and connecting with the earth, um, to be in alignment, to be in agreement,
Mm-hmm.
um, and maneuvering that energy, to create and manifest what I need and what I want.
Oh my goodness. So, woo. I feel rocked right now. Like I just felt like you rocked me in your bosom, and I'm just like, I feel so warm right now.
Oh, I love that. Look.
Oh no, seriously, like everything you just said resonates with me on so many levels. Like I had a low point too,
Mm,
early on in my career. Like I know I came to, teaching because I taught in New Orleans public school system too. I knew that I came there with baggage as well and just a lot of unaddressed issues that I wasn't aware of like I am now. But I felt like I was constantly under attack and I was undervalued, and it enticed those demons in me to, you know what I mean? And
that school shit, look, and not to interrupt, I
go
just want to say that what you said is so real, especially, and I know this is not what we're here to talk about, but the thing about Black women in education is they come in, we come into these institutions ran by white folk who are premised on critique and premised on the idea that you'll never be good enough, that you'll never be great enough, that you will always be like, and if they operate in a deficit mentality, then
hmm
they tell you it's not about you at all. It's just about the kids because they get to separate their identity. Where it's like, I'm a Black girl looking at a little Black girl who looks just like me, who's living the trauma that I had to fought my way out of. And now I'm trying to be a role model in front of her when I got unresolved shit by myself. But
exactly.
you telling me there's no space for me to speak or uplift my own pain. So I hear you. And I've seen too many Black women in education, literally lose their minds,
Yeah,
have these deep lows. I know some who've lost their life, you
yeah,
know, all at the sake of of this perfectionism and undervaluing that is taught in a lot of these schools right now.
yeah. It's sickening. Like the gaslighting that goes on. That you will get to a point where you're like, damn, am I crazy? And I hit that low point, like what you were talking about when you said it was either it was a matter of life or death. And I distinctly remember that moment where I almost gave up. I'm like, I just don't want to be here anymore. And
Mm,
God came to me and was like, if you choose life, I promise you, I'm going to show you a way out of this.
mm,
And when I was like, okay, and when I finally understood that idea, like faith the size of a mustard seed, because I wasn't fully believing that I was going to come out of it, I just was like, okay. And I felt that heavy burden like immediately lifted from me. And that's when I knew, I mean, I was already a believer, but that strength in my faith in God. And now even like hearing you speak, I'm like, yes, it's confidence I've always seen on you, but I'm like, no, what I've always seen was the light of God on you. That's what you've been
mm,
reflecting.
mm.
And that's why I've been always like mesmerized by you. So
Make me cry.
girl, cry. Like I said, I've learned to lean into it.
Yeah,
So your book, The Cleanse, I cannot wait. Now I have this conversation with you. I cannot wait to get my copy and
yeah.
read it. And you are paying homage to like Toni Morrison's beloved. So I want to know, like, what was it about like Baby Shug's character that resonates with you the most?
So first of all, I'm a teacher. I taught Beloved for 3 years in my classroom. And
Okay.
in general, it was a book I was terrified to teach. I actually didn't want to move to 11th grade English because Beloved was on the docket, because I was so intimidated by that book, because in hindsight, like I just knew it was spiritually heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot in Beloved. And I read it for myself first. And before I even read it, I would carry Beloved around with me. I
Mm-hmm.
would, if there was a community altar, I would go place it on that altar. Um, I would take it to the park. Like I needed the energy to be right when I got ready to read it for myself before teaching it to young folk.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read it, and I read about baby Shugs, I remember that the one of the first things that Toni Morrison calls her is an unchurched preacher. And that hit me in my bones.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I told you, I grew up in the Baptist church, but
Mm-hmm.
I quickly began to understand that that doctrine and the religious practices associated with that exclusively were not going to let me be as full and expansive that I wanted to be. And what I wanted to do was follow God, period,
Mm-hmm.
right? Wherever God so lead me. So to see Baby Shirley's called an unchurched preacher,
Yeah.
right, immediately made me feel like this is not the sanctified woman. This
Yeah.
is not the woman whose skirt is clean. You know, I always say this is not the one who thinks themselves as high or holy or is going to pretend like they've never been through shit.
Ooh.
And a pressure that I've felt, especially amongst Black elite folk, is Naomi, leave that personal story, leave all that vulnerable shit behind. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like turn that off and walk into this eliteness and be in that box. And I tried that, and that shit does not serve me. So to again see Baby Shugs, who was an unchurched preacher who had been a slave, right, then say, I'm not only am I going to move my heart for the spirit of myself, right? Like not only am I going to use this love I got to give for my family, but I'm actually going to invite the collective of Black folk to come to a place that I have been so that we can all get in on this loving and we can all get in on this healing, right? Because that's what she does. She has these folks who had to remember what it meant to touch their body, had to learn really in a free way because they had been slaves. Their bodies had been positioned about around labor. And while we're not slaves technically in 2021, I think a lot about how my Black woman body is ancestrally exhausted from laboring.
Yes,
And
girl.
how I have to remember how coming out of teaching, I had to remember who I was, right? So she takes them to this place and she says, touch your hands because they rather see them locked up in chains, right? Touch your neck, love it because they rather see it in a noose,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think I just realized, I'm like, this world is going to be mean to me, has the potentially to be mean to me. I cannot contribute to it. I cannot be mean
Yeah.
to myself too. I
Yeah.
gotta love myself just that much harder because I know folks, I know society is not always gonna love a body like mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? So seeing her do that, seeing her be an unchurched preacher and do that. And then Toni also says that, essentially the reason that led her there is because all she had left to give was her heart, right? Her hip was thrown out from standing, you know what I mean? Like her eyes was going blind. All she had left to give was her heart. And I thought that was magnificent when, especially when I think about myself as a poet and how this is a work of my heart. And,
Mm-hmm.
I, used to organize and do direct action, and I don't have that to give really no more.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I'm a professional organizer right now. And
Oh,
when
baby.
I felt that.
Felt that. But, but what I do have to give is You know what? God has given me with this ability to articulate what I have been through in this Black woman experience. So it might give some other Black girls some sanctuary so that
Mm-hmm.
we can collectively get our bones together and find our own clearing and create our own, reality.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I'm leaning into, is that my heart is what I have to give. And if love is all I've got to give, then I know I'm powerful.
Ooh, listen. Whenever you start this institution, whether it's the Church of Naomi, the Temple of Naomi, whatever it is, I want to be on the front pew. Okay, please, this
I
prayer
love
line.
that.
I'm about to have it on speed now because like the word that I'm receiving, which speaks to like the testament why I even created this space. I say it time and time again. I created this space for me. Like you talked about, like the healing work. Shit, it began with me. Like I needed it, right? And I still do. I have not reached enlightenment, and now I know everything, and now I have to like lead
Right.
all broken souls. You know what I'm saying? Even that concept of an unchurched preacher, that resonates with me as well, because I came from the church's Baptist praise dance team. I saw some pictures of you praise dance. I was like, yeah.
Don't make me be
Man,
no dude.
right? Mind, and all. But
Yeah.
I felt that because even as a professional organizer, even before then, people have asked me like, "Oh, do you want to get into politics? Do you want to run for office? Do you want to do this?" I'm like, in no shade, I have friends who are on the track of having a political career.
They
Great, we need
did.
more of us in those seats at making those decisions. But
Right.
for me, I'm like, my ministry, my political role is creating these liberation spaces specifically for Black women, for them to like, you know, rediscover their power, right? It was always there. It's just along your journey, your attention was deflected from it, right? And you were taught to try to meet these standards that you would never fucking meet because they weren't meant for you to meet, right? Well, honestly, I can exceed them. Them standards are mediocre. You just trying to convince me that I'm inferior and I'm the problem, but that's a story for another
And
day.
two, it's a lot about seeds. I don't know who I was listening to, but it's the reality. A lot of those institutions, want to plant a piece of broccoli, and you're a pumpkin. You know what I mean? Like, so you're not gonna grow like no broccoli.
Right.
You this big wide pumpkin. You know what I mean?
Right, orange.
Right. They trying to add some fertilizer,
Right.
see if you can become what they want you to be, but that's not what you were created. That's not the seed that you are meant to sow.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Dang, I really want more time with you. I want to
I
be
love
so
the
selfish. And like, I just want her to myself. I swear, I'm like, whatever it is, just bottle it up. And when my anxiety spike, I'm just going to take 2 in the morning, whatever Naomi got going on. Um, yes. So I've learned like this healing journey is probably going to be for life. There's always going to be something because, like you said, this is ancestral, this is
yeah,
generational trauma
yeah.
that we're carrying. And, you know, I've even had to show myself grace. That's my therapist's favorite thing to tell me, and like multiple times in the sessions, like, show yourself some grace. I put so much pressure on myself to like, I have to completely fix myself so I don't pass this on to my children and their children's children. But I'm learning like, girl, don't you kill yourself trying to like, no, do hundreds and centuries of years worth of damage. Like, no, that's not what God has called you to do. Is
Period.
to perfect yourself, right? So there are things that I'm still healing from that happened in high school. And I have to show myself grace because there's times I'm like, girl, that was over 10 years ago. Suck it up. Like, no, but it still hurts. Like,
Mhm.
it still hurts that I didn't get asked to the prom. It still hurts that, you know, I didn't have a boyfriend in high school and in college, right? Like, those things still hurt because I attach so much of my worth depending on validation from people. And so I'm still dealing with that. But what are some things that you feel comfortable that, you know, you've done this cleanse through writing the cleanse plug, shameless plug for the book. What are some things that you're, yes, the clearing. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Clearing. It sounds like the cleanse, because that's what I feel every time you talk. I feel purged.
It's a purge, baby. My mama read it. She said, "Oh, okay, you was purging, huh?" I said, "Yes."
Letting it out. So, what are some things right now in this season that you're currently processing and trying to?
Yeah. So the first thing that I want to lift up is that um you said you were talking about like this pressure. My therapist always talks to me about how I pressure myself to be an actor, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
always trying to be, or I have often tried to be the last picture on the picture page chapter book. And
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm trying to do, something I'm working on is finding pleasure in all parts of the journey, right?
Mm-hmm. I need to write
Because
it down.
because
Continue.
I've accepted that, I'm going to, like, right now I'm going through a period of discomfort. I'm at a point of transition. A lot of my things in my life, I'm having to make some really big decisions. I'm supporting some family financially, and I'm at a point of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what is giving me comfort is, again, just finding little moments of pleasure and little moments of ease throughout my day, right? Because I think when I read back to Toni Morrison, I was watching the pieces of I Am that I Am, and Sonia Sanchez was like, "You need to read Toni Morrison every 10 years to, like, just
Yes. That documentary was everything, by the way.
yeah, it was."
Uh-huh.
And I think not only do I put pressure on myself to be an actor, but I'm also very uninterested in investing in this society in the way that it is and participating in that. And because of that divestment, I'm often in my head investing and dreaming myself into this future. Now,
Mm-hmm.
something I had to humble myself with is like, baby, this take time. You know what I mean? You might not, the world that you want to live in, to be safe in the body that you have and the existence that you have, it's going to take time, but that doesn't mean there won't be an abundance of pleasure. And
Mm-hmm.
when I read Beloved, and I think back to even when Paul D was in the chain gang, and they're breaking open this earth, and how, like, she spoke about it in this like erotic way of like them using the earth to transfer this energy out of them, and in that receiving pleasure and release.
Mm-hmm.
And this is someone who literally like has been through some stuff, some extreme stuff, literally changed with a group of men, but is finding pleasure in that, and then finding pleasure in their collective song.
Mm-hmm.
So it is thinking about my ancestors and the reality of like what they lived, and the fact that they were still able to erect joy. Black folks can always be joyous. And I think another book that I go through too when I'm in points like I am, where I'm like, ooh, I'm navigating some shit, is Hard Times Require Furious Dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's less about the collection and it's more about the title.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the place that I am now in my processing is like, okay, Nay, especially being in my Saturn return. All right, girl, we get it. All right. You have feelings of abandonment. You're dealing with the fact that your dad left you, and that, that your paternal family, kind of abandoned you after your death. Like, you're feeling with feeling like you're still like this poor Black girl, and even in this body and reality that you have now, and feeling some like feelings of resentment for folks who haven't had to struggle financially, family like you, right? Like, I'm dealing with like being in this fat body, and like knowing how terrible the world can treat me because of the body and the skin that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a moment with the police recently where I was like searched for no reason, and just knowing how just violent, comfortable they felt being violent with this body.
Yeah.
Um, and being like, okay, Nay, we can dwell on this shit. And
Yeah.
we've done that, right? We can really sit and remember the hurt. And that's important too. Or we can say, all right, sis, in this time, these are not new things. You've seen this already. How are we going to force yourself to slowly begin erecting these tools that you have been putting in your toolkit? Because that's the thing. Healing is first. Like, let me figure out what can screw tighten this, what can open this up. Okay, I have all these things now.
Mhm.
Then it's the second part of being like, oh, I really just want to lay in my bed and cry forever. But instead, I'm just gonna get up and I'm gonna just do some light ass shaking to
Mhm.
my favorite song and just focus on how my body feels as I'm shaking and I'm letting this move outside of me. And I might not feel good for the whole day, but I feel good for right now, right? So I think it has just been important for me to lean on the fact that, like, yes, Nay, you might see another storm again. You can't control what's going to happen in this world. You can't even really control how people are going to treat you, but you know how to treat yourself now.
Girl.
So,
Oh,
eh,
word.
yeah.
No. Seriously. And that's one of the many umpteen things that I love about being Black is we always find our way back to our joy, right? Even in the midst of the storm, even in the midst of darkness, like we're gonna find our joy. And it's funny to like, not funny, it's important to find those ways to, like you said, just finding pleasure for yourself. And, us having struggles with mental illness. Well, I don't know if I'm putting that on you. I know I did.
Oh, I have, baby.
Oh, okay.
I'm not secretive about it at all.
Okay, I was like, I know some people they still, like, hold up now, don't put that on me. But
I don't think do I struggle with it, but I have several people in my family, but most closely, my elder brother has a very serious struggle with mental illness. That also, because it's like one thing to be at you and also to be supporting
mm-hmm.
other family members.
Yeah. So dang, I'm just like so upset because I literally want to talk to you for the rest of the day. I'm so serious. Like I was in a weird space all day. My energy was
Mm.
weird, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna make sure I am like centered and grounded because I was looking forward to this conversation. And I'm so glad we had it. Like, I feel like this is a divine order why this even
Yeah.
happened. We're just happy to share this experience with other people. But I think we needed it. I know I did because there was
No,
some.
I did. I did.
I got
Mhm.
my index cards. I'm like, she just dropped a damn gem. Break it down. So I only have like two more questions. One, I know I can't wait to read the book. What do you want readers to receive when they read the clearing, not the cleanse, the clearing?
Well, first of all, I wanted to continue to be received by Black women
Mm,
and Black girls, because I think anyone can read this book. But the subtitle is "A Black Girl Collecting Her Bones for a Reason." Um, and I'm at this point in my life where I realized that all my work I wanted to be of service to Black women. That is my focal point. That is my point of interest. I'm not going to apologize for it.
mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, I'm a tarot reader, and like being a spiritual practitioner for that way, there's no greater fulfillment that I have when a Black woman comes to me in that space. And after we've worked without whatever it was that was on their mind, and they walk away, just feeling like you can see that they've have clarity. So I think, when it comes to this book, my deepest wish is that this brings someone closer to themselves, that this helps someone purge out some else, some their own things, that this helps someone figure out what their own clearing looks like, what
Yeah.
their own circle of safety, what their own divine exhale feels like. um I pray for it to be a blueprint, a roadmap to someone else's toolbox,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can be their own immaculate self. And I wish and pray that most for Black girls and Black women when reading this book.
Oof. I'm literally like, oh, I cannot wait till this thing hit my mailbox because I'm looking at my nose in it. Because you're right. I feel like we need it the most because so much is taken from us for more than anybody else. And we're taught like that, yeah, that's your obligation as a Black woman. It's just give, give, give,
And
give.
not say anything. And I think that was the most revolutionary. I'm still grappling with it. I'm not going to act like this is easy. The
Girl,
hardest part of this book has been thinking about how my family is going to respond.
listen. Girl, I know. It's so complex, right? Because a huge part of your story, it does involve your family, right? And there's like this delicate dance of like trying to honor their story with integrity, but then still honoring yours as well, right? Like I
Baby,
honor my peace.
I ain't telling you how to tell your story.
Mhm.
I ain't saying what you said happened. I'm saying this is what happened to me. This is
Right.
how I feel in this body.
Yes.
But standing in that has been, because this, some of it is not even necessarily having to do with them. You know, I in the first page, you know, I bite off Tony's style and I tell you everything that you can expect on the first page in the first poem. And one of the things that I mentioned is that I was molested. And I know some folks in my family know. I don't know how wide it's known. But also in that same book, in this same book,
Hmm.
I have a poem about it's called The First Time. And it's a poem about masturbation, if I'm being honest. And the reason it was so important for me to include that poem, and knowing that, like, you know, knowing people are going to read it and like draw their own conclusions, but also being like, my actual first time was not mine and it was taken from me. So this moment where I gave this pleasure back to myself, where like I found comfort in this own and pleasing this own body, I remember that, like, I remember it to this day, that time.
Hmm.
And that's how I want my first time to be remembered, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so I think that even though it might make my, you know, auntie uncomfortable, I pray that it brings some comfort to a 16-year-old girl who still ain't told nobody.
Amen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, and feels disenfranchised. Cause you know, something I had to really work on in therapy was like pleasure, what I associated with disgust because of my reality as a child of molestation.
Hmm.
So it was really hard for me to experience pleasure without getting physically nauseous, right?
Yeah.
So to learn to get to a point
Hmm.
where I could happily pleasure myself was truly revolutionary.
Yeah.
Um,
And we ain't gonna apologize for it, sis.
yes.
No, I get it because I write as well, and through my own reflection, like I've been processing a lot of my history in relation to my family, like the messages that I internalized because of the things that they said, right? Like I still, even though I have a lot more confidence around my body than I've had my entire life, girl's a journey getting here. Like I
Okay,
still look at my little fupa and be like, dang, how much more
right.
to tuck this in a bit? Because I remember, like, girl, you just need to lose some weight. Or if you will look good if you just lost your stomach, and that still plays in my head. And I mean, there's a lot other things that I witnessed and saw in my family, but I think what helps me to have peace with it is knowing my intention is not of malice. I am not doing this to hurt you. I'm not doing this to condemn anybody. I don't have that type of power anyway. And like
Mhm.
my intention is to heal one myself. And
Mhm.
in my own healing journey, I've learned like, yes, your first responsibility is to yourself, but there is a responsibility to other people that comes with it. Cause I think about, Solange's A Seat at the Table. That album like was a huge part in saving my life. Like Cranes in the Sky.
Talk about an album for Black girls.
Yes.
Okay, shoot, she said, baby, I tried to fuck it away. I tried to cry it away. Like I said, but who hasn't been there?
But I tried to drink it away. I tried to put it in the air. Like, I mean, I still do, but but in a healthy way.
Yeah.
All of that, like, I remember the first time I heard that song and I looped it and I cried. I still cry to this day listening to Cranes in the Sky. I'm like, girl, you are documenting my entire journey right now. So, like I said, knowing that she did that for herself, right? Like that was her own purging, that was her own clearing. But her gifting that to the world, like help women like me and you and so many other Black girls and Black women. So that's what kind of helps me. Like, no, I'm gonna write this story. Mama, you gonna feel some type of way. Daddy might feel some type of way too, but that ain't my intention.
Yes. I love that. Baby. I'm gonna let you know. I'm gonna quote you, but I'm gonna steal that.
I would be honored.
I'm about to see some family. Baby, my intention was not of malice.
Listen, period. Just leave it there. Like that's it. I don't have to explain any further. They gotta work the rest of that out because that's really wrestling with things. My last question is, so I named, excuse me, Blackbird Initiative. The Blackbird is after Nina Simone's song Blackbird. Yeah, I love it.
My girl.
I love me some Nina, okay? Like we got a whole,
I don't know if you can tell, but that's Nina and James Baldwin.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, Nina, my girl.
I like love her and I feel so connected to Nina. But that particular song, when I was in that dark space, that song resonated with me, right? Because it is a very melancholy song of just feeling down and out and why even dream of hoping, right? This has been our reality. That's why it's like the chorus is why you want to fly, Blackbird. But I wanted to change the meaning through this space because that's what like it's about examining our pain, looking our demons straight in the eyes and saying, no, it's necessary for me to fly. It's necessary for me to be free. So that's my question for you is like, why do you want to fly, Blackbird? Why is your liberation so necessary?
By any means necessary.
Amen.
So, recently, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've had goosebumps through most of it. And recently, I had a very terrifying encounter with the police. I was like in the swamp area outside of the city. I had called and asked for help. They came, they had me on my car, they were searching me. I was by myself. And the irony of the whole situation is the whole reason I was out there in the woods was because I needed to get my spirit together. This was the week that my kid had been killed, and that shit rocked my whole body. I was going through my own things in life, and I was just tired, right? And the reason I said by any means necessary is, like you listening to Nina and feeling witness, I often feel really witness when I go back to our Black archive because I'm like, I'm not the first person who's been through this. There's a history of folk who can share in this collective feeling that I'm feeling right now. And I think about what Malcolm meant by any means necessary and what it meant for me when I felt it in this moment was, I'm gonna protect my spirit by any means necessary. Because we talk a lot about physical murder. We talk a lot about the way the white supremacy will off your body. But what I've also seen is spiritual death. Yeah. I've seen spiritual deprecation. And when I realized it was really this late 2020, early 2021, it set in my bones. When I say it set in my bones that the number one thing still killing Black women today is stress. Girl. it's set in my bones. And that's when I was like, I'm going to protect my spirit. I'm going to invest in the wellness of my body by any means necessary. Um, and I think about what happens when we do that, right? Like, I think that there is so much power in Black women um, collectively being a witness to ourselves so that we can also be witnessed by each other because we are what we need, right? That's what we're doing right now. It's like, shit, I'm witnessing my own self so you can witness me. You're witnessing your own self so I can witness you. And it's in this collective witnessing that we say, all right, we're going to be all right. Like you got me, you know, my liberation is bound up in yours. You feel good, I feel good, so we can move it forward. And that's why, you know, from that experience with the police, I said, you know, I've been blessed to be at this place because of a lot of struggle and strife, right? Because of a lot of heartbreak and destruction. I've been fortunate to be in this place where I'm at a point of like spiritual transition in terms of like, okay, I know what my tools are now. So by any means necessary, not only do I need to participate in my own collective strength, but I need to again be a witness and bear witness to other Black women for the sake of our liberation, for the sake of our freedom, for the sake of our dreamscape, right? Because when I'm spiritually well, I can dream. I can think of possibilities. I can, you know, actualize outcomes. I can love good. I don't have to be short with my child who needs me to be soft with them. You see what I'm saying? Because I'm spiritually well, because I'm spiritually full. But it's like, you know, often when I'm not spiritually full is when I am my worst self, is when I always used to say in the classroom, when I felt the most oppressed is when I oppressed my students the most. Okay. So it's like my spiritual wellness is important. Again, it's like my choosing to fly by any means necessary. This is my liberation work because I'm trying to erect a wide open dreamscape for you and I and all Black girls to be free.
I literally have nothing to add because the way you just poured into my cup just now, I'm like, I need to let this just seep on in. All of that, right? Like that is the spirit of this space is us coming together, right? Because like your healing helps me to heal, and I want that the same for you and other women. That's why I'm like nothing hits like the touch of a Black woman.
Love that. Nothing hits like the touch. I need that on the shirt, sis.
You know, I was just
I need that on the journal. Like,
yes, we got to get it together, but I'm not going to keep you. This has been more than a joy. It's been a blessing to me. I know it's going to be a blessing to other folks. I appreciate you for taking the time and sitting down with me. Like, I legit was inspired by what you were sharing around your book. I'm like, I want to write a piece called I Became My Own Healer because and you inspired me for that. So I had to let you know, once again, give you your flowers, because one of my mantras that I was blessed with last year through the Holy Spirit was, I may not be responsible for all the pain that that I've endured, but I'm fully responsible for my healing. And I would try to live by that in this space. And so that's my word for Black women. Like, we can't look to other people to heal us, sis. I know we ain't do this to ourselves, but we can't look to our oppressors to be the ones to liberate us. Like, we have to be the ones that try to heal ourselves, but you don't have to do it by yourself either. You know, it's better. It hits differently when you're in a collective. So thank you for just being so revolutionary in your vulnerability and sharing of you, because you don't have to, right? You can keep all this greatness to yourself, but you shared it with us. So thank you so much. And I'm gonna end the recording